Okay, we are switching now to acrylic paint, and so we need to talk a little bit about how acrylic painting works versus watercolor painting. Yesterday we switched out palettes. You returned your watercolor palette to me and you got an acrylic palette. Um, you also got a new paintbrush. There were a variety of paintbrush sizes to choose from. You should have put your name on the lid of your acrylic palette because they'll all look very much the same without your name on them. So being we all have our own palette, just putting your name on the lid is a great idea. So I'm just gonna take my lid and set it underneath my palette. And my job today is to get paint. We're working just with the three primary colors. We're going back to the beginning of our color knowledge and those three components of color, which are hue, which is the name of the color, value, which is how light or how dark a color is, and intensity, which is how brilliant or how dull a color is. We will also talk and learn a lot about how to make different textures using layered paint techniques in acrylic paint as well. So we're going to start today with a color wheel, kind of going back to the beginning of time, and alter hue, which means we're going to mix more than one color together to make a new color, and we need the three primaries for that. Yesterday we talked about making sure when we grab paint that we grab a toothpaste amount of paint, not a barbecue sauce amount of paint. So you have the three primary colors in paint bottles at your paint station. We will eventually also have paint tubes at the paint station. The bottles, you want to make sure that they stand on their lid so the paint goes down to the bottom. And then it's just to, they do open up and you can give them a little squirt. If you find these little chunks, those just go in the trash. Just a gentle squeeze should get you the right amount of paint. If you squeeze really hard, you're going to get way too much paint. With the paint tubes, these unscrew, obviously, and then I'm just going to give a little squeeze until I have a little pile of paint. I am then going to make sure that I screw the lid all the way back on. Tubes need to be shut all the way because remember, acrylic paint dries fairly fast, 10 to 15 minutes, and it will dry in the end of the tube as well, and it will turn to plastic. So we talked about that yesterday as well, that acrylic paint, when it's wet, we can mix it and wash it out with water, but once it's dry, it is a polymer. It is a plastic product, so it will not wash off. It will not wash off your clothes. It will not wash off the paintbrushes if you leave it in the paintbrushes, and you want to make sure that you are being conscious of that as we're working. Yesterday you got to choose a brush. I had several different sizes available for you. If you chose one of the bigger brushes and then today you decide that the bigger brush isn't going to work for you, today will be the last day that I will trade you paintbrushes. After today you will just have to figure it out and make it work. You will get a packet that we will work our way through this week and the beginning of next week. And the very first thing I recommend that you do is put your name on all of the sheets. All right. You do have to turn in each of these, just like when we did the learning activities with watercolor. Each of these packets, each of these pages is a 10-point grade in the grade book. So you want to make sure that you're keeping track of the packet so that next week on Wednesday, when you have to turn the packet in, that you still have all of your papers, okay? So one different thing from watercolor, I still need paper towel. I still need water to clean my paintbrush out, but I'm not gonna wet my paintbrush before I start. This is just a clean, dry paintbrush. And what I'm going to do is actually take my paint and scoop it up onto the surface of my paintbrush. So you can see I actually have a chunk of paint on the brush. I'm going to take and I'm going to move that paint out here onto the surface of my sheet. We have switched to a paintbrush that's called a flat, and you will see that my paint goes ahead and covers all of the information on the sheet. So I will be able to cover the lines right up. A flat paintbrush is a unique painting tool in that you basically get two paintbrushes at the same time. So if I take my paintbrush and I slide it towards me the wide way, I have a really big paintbrush. If I take my paintbrush and stand it up or tip it to the side, I have a very small paintbrush. So it is an advantage to work with this sort of paintbrush that I basically have a big paintbrush and a small paintbrush all at the same time if I think about how to use it. Just like when we worked in watercolor, yellow is our weakest color. So I always want to be conscious of when I mix a color with yellow that I'm adding the other color to yellow and not adding the yellow to another color. Yellow will not change a color very quickly. So I'm going to make an orange, and you can see I have moved a little blip of my yellow out here into the mixing area. And now I'm going to come in here with the red, and I'm going to grab a tiny little corner of red paint. So you see how small a piece of red paint that I have grabbed. And I'm going to mix these two together out here on my palette. Now, one thing you want to be conscious of is not like mixing in a huge pile. I don't want to just smear this all over the inside of my palette, because all I'm doing then is just wasting my paint. I'm painting the inside of my palette, and really I need my paint for out on my paper. I added just enough red to make a yellow orange, which is fantastic, because I can show you another great thing about acrylic paint is this, that my acrylic paint does not, because we're not using any water, it is not going to mix and blend with a wet color next door. So you can see that I can paint my yellow orange right up to and touching my yellow on my color wheel. I now can just go ahead and grab another little dab of red and continue to mix in this same pile. Again, I'm trying to keep my pile reasonably small so that I'm not spreading my paint all over my palette. I am also trying to make sure that my paint color changes and that I mixed together all of the paint that's in my brush. Might need just a little bit more yellow. There we go. Now I have a decent orange. We go ahead and paint that orange on my paper. Noticing that when I'm here at the wide end of my color wheel, I'm using my brush wide, and when I go into the point, I'm sliding my brush up and down so that I get the smaller effect of that brush. If when I go to paint, like there is no coverage, like if it's hairy, that's just a sign I'm not scooping enough and moving enough paint. Like the paint should actually sit on the surface of the paper. I can go ahead and mix in a bit more orange or a bit more red now to make my red orange. I'm going to compare that to the red and make sure that it isn't too red. Red orange. And you'll notice that I have yet to clean my paintbrush. I always try to work as efficiently as possible when I'm painting. And with acrylic paint, if I'm just kind of conscious of mixing from light to dark, I can go, I made 4 colors without ever having to change or rinse my paintbrush. I am now, however, going to need to paint either with blue or just with clean red. So it's time for me to clean my brush. Cleaning my paintbrush, I am going to need a bin of water, and I'm going to make sure that, like with watercolor, we could just sort of swish our brush. With acrylic paint, you can see that if I swish, I still have quite a bit of paint left in my paintbrush. And so what I need to do is sort of bounce the paintbrush off on the bottom of the bucket. I'm not like smashing it, I'm sort of leaning it over. So what I'm doing is going like this on the bottom of the bucket to make sure that I get all of that paint out of my paintbrush along the bottom. So you can see now my paintbrush is clear. I can test that it's clear. Well, there's still quite a bit of yellow paint in there actually. by doing just what I did. If I squeeze it with my hand and colored water still comes out of there, or painty water still comes out of there, that's a sign that I haven't quite got all the paint out of my brush. I will find that I need to change my water more frequently than we did with watercolor. The paint kind of builds up at the bottom. And I do need to dry my paintbrush out. So that's why we still need paper towel. I'm just gonna squeeze my paintbrush dry. I'm going to go ahead and kind of reshape it. And switch from there to my next color of paint. So you guys can go ahead and finish working on your color wheel.